Sometimes I get questions about the stoles that we have, and not just how we wear them. Jenny and I wear these stoles because we are ordained deacons in the United Methodist Church. Jonathan wears a yoke-type stole, but more the colors and what they mean. There's some very special ones that read justice and joy and Micah. Today I'm wearing a green stole, and that's because in the liturgical season right now, we're in what's called, and this is really creative, ordinary time. And what astonishes me about ordinary time is that it continues to be a time of learning. It continues to be a time where we can discern and we can listen and we can slow down a little bit and read about the teachings of Jesus and read about what the Spirit is doing amongst us in this summer time. So today, as I shared in the welcome time, we've invited 4 different people to speak with us today about their stories, about what they've learned, about how they learn. We've got people who have been, someone who's been here for years, some who have been here a year, and to start off with, we have Erica Shields, who joined the church this year. So, Erica, would you like to share?
Thank you. Good morning. When I was asked to speak for Today I Learned, I started thinking about what I've actually learned through a 15-year career of working in social justice and environmental justice, philanthropy, and now in child protection. The lesson I keep coming back to is this: trying to do justice is not the same as always knowing what justice requires of us. This is a lesson that drew me to this church and has made this church feel like home. For as long as I can remember, my instinct has been to seek justice, much like many of the people I've met in this church. If I see something wrong, I have a visceral need to try and fix it. I have always been a textbook change maker. In high school, I literally joined every single club we had, and when there wasn't a club for a cause that I cared about, I started one. I started about 5. So for a long time, I thought the people who created change were the ones at the front, the ones who leaned into challenging contexts, built the solutions, and convinced everyone else to follow. That desire to create positive change eventually took me to East Africa, where I lived full-time for 7 years and a few part-time years after that. After studying wildlife biology in college, I moved to Tanzania right after my final exams to work with the Jane Goodall Institute's youth program, which is called Roots and Shoots. And I had started my high school's Roots and Shoots club. When I was young, idealistic, and eager to be useful, I learned Swahili quite quickly, and I stepped into leadership, traveling across the country to work with Tanzanian youth clubs full of young people who had the same instinct for justice that I had. 2 years later, I moved to Uganda to work with Akola, which is an organization serving close to 1,000 single mothers living in extreme poverty. They have an average of 7 dependents, live on the banks of the Nile River, and we provided them with living wage jobs and holistic programming. I was given an extraordinary amount of responsibility early in my career, especially in this role. I was quickly promoted into the country director role, which was the top of the organization there. I helped lead the growth of that organization. I managed a large team. I designed programs. We successfully launched our jewelry in US department stores, including Neiman Marcus and Nordstrom. And best of all, the women we served through Akola were thriving. They were sending all of their children to school, building brick homes after spending their entire lives in mud huts, starting businesses, and even some of them became local government officials. It was thrilling. I was passionate and hardworking, and I was also far less qualified than the power I had been given suggested. While I am proud of much of the work from that season, frankly, it's uncomfortable to look back at the dynamics of privilege and power. I began noticing how people from wealthy countries arrived in communities with fundraised money, confidence, and good intentions, and were immediately treated as experts. And before I share some examples of what I witnessed, I want to say that there are good examples of work being done in these communities. I'm just sharing a little bit of what made me very jaded in that time. My home in Uganda was a small town named Jinja, a missionary hotspot. I saw missionaries take on complex medical or social work for which they had no training, including performing medical procedures that only doctors could legally do, with zero repercussions. I saw children with living, loving parents separated from their families through international adoption because poverty left those parents believing that giving up their child was the only way to grant them access to education or health care. And rather than asking why families were forced into that choice, outsiders celebrated the adoption as an act of rescue. People leading the work felt compassionate and useful, but they were not always asking whether the local community had meaningful power or whether their presence was actually needed. I became deeply jaded. I started to believe that most justice work was designed around the emotional needs of the helper. Because our intentions were good, we treated ourselves as exempt from scrutiny. And this was also crushing for my faith because most of this work was done in faith communities in the name of God. Some people in my circles read books like When Helping Hurts and believed that simply becoming aware of paternalism meant that they were no longer participating in it. But knowing the language of humility is not the same as surrendering power. That period changed how I understood justice. I went to graduate school in Rwanda, and I became focused on participatory development, the idea that the people closest to a problem should have the greatest authority in shaping the response. I started asking different questions. Why was I the one being called an expert when local women knew far more about their lives and communities than I ever could? I couldn't change my instinct to do justice work, but my goal shifted. I no longer wanted to be the change maker at the front. I wanted to be the person in the background, the person who moved money, access, and infrastructure toward people with lived experience, and then got out of the way. And for a long time, I believed that I had learned that final lesson. My role in justice work meant stepping back. But in my current role, I've had to complicate that belief. Today, I run a family foundation and lead an organization called No More Victims Alliance. Much of my work is alongside survivors of child abuse, as well as the 26 families whose daughters died during the flooding at Camp Mystic last July. These individuals and families have experienced devastating preventable harm while children were in the care of institutions that were supposed to protect them. After the immediate crisis or disclosure that abuse occurred, there's a quick realization that the system will not change on its own. If survivors and allies want legislation, accountability, or stronger protections for other children, they often have to build the change themselves. I hear a lot of these people talk about the burden that comes with experiencing this harm. They realize they have to give their lives to preventing it from happening to others. This means telling painful stories, publicly meeting with lawmakers, and sustaining grueling campaigns. Work they never expected to take on, and work they carry while grieving and healing. Their experiences must shape and lead the work, but I have started to see a limitation in my old understanding of stepping back. Centering people with lived experience should never mean asking them to constantly lead. This work has made me reconsider my instinct to stay in the background. Sometimes stepping back just leaves more work for people who have already carried far too much. And I'm learning to lead more publicly again, not to speak for survivors or families, but to build a protective structure around their leadership and well-being. Leading does not have to mean taking over. And this brings me to Micah 6:8. What does the Lord require of you but to do justice and to love mercy and to walk humbly with your God? For much of my life, I focused almost entirely on the first part, do justice. Then I became so aware of the harm done in the name of justice that I focused almost entirely on walking humbly, distrusting my instincts and trying to stay out of the way. And now I think the wisdom is in holding them together. Humility does not mean pretending we have nothing to offer. Doing justice does not mean assuming we should be in charge. And loving mercy means moving towards suffering with compassion, tenderness, and a willingness to serve in ways that honor the dignity and leadership of others. Walking humbly means asking over and over, am I listening? Am I stepping forward because I am needed or because I want to feel important? Am I stepping back because others should lead or because I'm afraid to take the responsibility? And what would it mean for me to carry my share of the weight without taking control? Today I learned, or more accurately, today I am still learning that there is no permanent answer to what our role is in the work of justice. Sometimes we should step back, and sometimes we should step forward. Our responsibility is to keep listening, keep acting, and remain humble enough to know that even when we are trying to do justice, we must always be willing to change the way that we do it. And I'm grateful to be a part of this church that I think asks all of those questions. So thank you for welcoming me to this community.
Thank you. Thank you, Erica. I do think that Erica has tapped into a little bit about what has been attracting people to Arapahoe, and that is the justice-minded, but with humility and with understanding that we can lead, but sometimes we follow as well in the community that we are helping. So we're United Methodists, and one thing I want to share with you about Leo Sharp is that he is our church lay leader. Anybody know what that means? I can see the longtime United Methodists raising their hand. In the United Methodist Church, we pair clergy and ordination with the laity, the lay people of the church, the non-ordained people, because we are all leaders and we all learn from each other, not just the supposed experts of the clergy, the ones that have the Masters of Divinity or Masters of Theological Studies, but also those who choose to lead us and to connect with us in a different way. That's Leo. Leo is going to share his story about what he has learned within the United Methodist Church, within the Horizon Texas Conference, and how he continues to listen to the Spirit about where to go next.
Thank you, Kathy. And you stole my thunder because I had a great introduction about being a lay leader. So pretend she didn't say that, and I'll start over. So the textbook definition is that I'm the primary representative and role model of Christian discipleship, living out my faith in the church and in daily life. I also partner with our pastors to fulfill the mission and vision of our congregation. In daily church life, I live that out by representing the lay people of the congregation as I work with the pastors. I'm engaging in spiritual practices to maintain a close and attentive relationship with God, serving as a role model for the congregation, and working with church leaders to launch or strengthen our ministries. Advising the leadership board about community needs and opportunities, and I meet regularly with the pastors to discuss the status of the church. You've probably seen me in church meetings, Sunday school classes, in halls, or at church meals. In fact, if you haven't seen me or spoken to me, I'm failing at my job. So please catch me in the hallway next time you see me and let's have a talk. So a little note about my journey with Lay Servant Ministries. To better accomplish these tasks, I felt compelled to enroll myself in the Lay Servant Ministries program. The program features 3 independent tracks. The lay servant, who serves in the local church as lay leader or leads meetings or prayers and study and discussion and provides community outreach. The lay speaker role focuses on preaching the word as requested by the pastor, district superintendent, or lay servant ministries committee. And the lay minister conducts public worship, cares for the congregation, develops new faith communities, preaches, leads small groups, and establishes outreach ministries and assists in program leadership. While not required for my current position, I have completed the requirements for all 3 levels, and I'm currently a candidate for both speaker and minister, pending the approval by the District Committee on Ordained Ministry. So how did I get here? So how did I get here? I learned to listen to that voice. Perhaps it's the Holy Spirit, perhaps it's God's voice, that divine small voice. It's that inspirational voice, that gentle nudge, that one thing that moves you. Listen for it and listen to it. Do I resist it? Am I imagining it? Is it for real? Do I dare to follow it? First, I had to discern what that voice was asking me to do. Good versus evil, left versus right, an upward movement or lateral movement, Marvel versus DC. Proverbs 16:9 states, "A man's heart plans his way, but the Lord directs his steps." My journey required me to listen to that voice, discern where it was asking me to go, and find the bravery to follow it. My path was very convoluted. I took classes with California, Nevada District, New England, North Carolina, and Great Plains conferences, making friends in all of them. The United Methodist Church is not a church in isolation. Thanks to our national and global infrastructure, we have resources almost everywhere. Just follow that voice, that calling of God or the Holy Spirit. Find your direction and give it your all. Your journey is your journey. Blaze your own path. Trust your voice and trust yourself. Be flexible enough to ask others for help, for guidance, for inspiration. Ask for someone to hold your hand or to give you a hug, but make the journey your own. Through this process, I learned a lot. I learned a lot about myself, what I wanted to do and what I didn't want to do. Part of my journey involved creating a ministry support team. I met with several wonderful people in this congregation to review class projects and share meals. They provided constant encouragement and input. They were and still are my team. You may not need a formal team, but there are people right here who can help you. You're not alone. Learning your spiritual gifts will also help you discern what you're capable of. My 2 top gifts are leadership and administration. Yeah, I'm one of those crazy people that like paperwork and spreadsheets. To borrow a phrase, I love the sound of a computer booting up in the morning. If you know, you know. After completing each course, lay servant, lay speaker, lay minister, I kept asking, what next? What should I do? Where should I go? Remember, it's your journey. Mine led me to lay ministry. Yours will lead you to someplace else. Engage, explore, and enjoy the journey. My path isn't perfect, my path isn't perfectly clear, but I have a general direction. The Spirit didn't give me a detailed project plan, just a nudge in the right direction, leaving me to fill in the blanks. At the annual conference, Bishop Sines asked the attendees, "Is that all you got?" I'm hoping that I have a lot more to give to our conference, our district, and to you, my church. Listen to that voice and try your best to follow the path that it's leading you towards. If you need to contact me, my email is really different. It's leo, L-E-O, at arapahoeumc.org. Thank you, and my God bless you on your journey.
Okay, I'm going to be careful this time so I don't steal anybody's thunder. Patrick and Allison are here as a couple. We haven't always had a couple share their story or share how they're learning. I thought it was important to ask how, given the families that we have, given the way that we communicate on a regular basis, I thought it was important to hear how families and couples might be struggling or learning together, how they might be listening for that discernment process. And so Allison Peasley and Patrick Figures will be sharing with us next.
When I think about our family's faith journey, it fits a pattern that we've experienced over and over again in our partnership. If you've known Patrick and me for any time, you've probably heard us describe the dynamic of our marriage like a car, where Patrick is the gas and I'm the brakes. Our family's faith journey predictably followed this pattern. I grew up in a non-denominational evangelical church, and I would describe my attitude toward faith as a young adult as skeptical, not of God or the teachings of Jesus, but of the church and the people I encountered who called themselves Christians. Because of this, it took Patrick's gas qualities to get us here. He was motivated by the desire to have the support of a faith community in the moral and spiritual instruction of our two young boys. Out of fear of putting our boys into the hands of people whose moral instruction we would have to unteach every Sunday, I was resistant. I scoured church websites for statements of faith and other evidence of theological positions. Oops, this one doesn't allow women in leadership. Nope, this one views homosexuality as a sin. And if I'm being honest, I was not convinced that faith was something that was missing in our lives. The faith I'd experienced growing up was largely about behavior policing, and I thought I could teach my boys how to be good people without the guilt and judgment I'd experienced in church. As the more restrained partner, I get to think of myself as the wise one in the partnership, the one with prudence and discernment. But there is such a thing as anxiety masquerading as common sense, and in this case, my husband was much wiser than I was. Before we were familiar with the works of Richard Rohr, plug for the book study we're leading next week, we'd love for y'all to join us. He felt intuitively that we were falling into the trap of what Rohr calls pick and choose morality, earnestly striving to be good people, but without the support of a community or a wisdom tradition to guide us. When you're living by pick and choose morality, you're making important decisions in a pressured, moment-to-moment way, acting on an internal sense of right and wrong, which can be influenced as much by emotion, exhaustion, frustration, or plain selfishness as it is by empathy or objective thinking. Patrick could see that the weight of forming our boys' moral compass was too big a burden for just the two of us, but I could only see how a church community might hurt us and not what a gift faith could be for our family. But the long lesson of our marriage has been to learn to trust and rely on one another's gifts, to see the ways in which we differ as the superpowers of our marriage, and not just as points of conflict. They are, in fact, both, and learning to see your partner's flaws as the necessary flip side of their strengths rather than defects in need of fixing is its own essential marriage lesson. But we've got like 6 or 7 minutes, so that's for another day. So I followed Patrick's lead, and it brought us here to Arapahoe.
I've commented before on how careful you have to be when you ask God a question because you have to live with the answer. And for us, the question we asked was, where can we bring our children that we feel like will be a home for them? And of course, the thing you have to be careful about is you might find a home, a spiritual home for yourselves. And that was Allison and I's situation, finding a home here at Arapahoe that fit so well with us as a family. Within the first weeks of visiting, we had meaningful, warm interactions with, and I worked to recall this, Judy, Michael, Dwayne, Rebecca, Jessica, and so many others here in this room and not here in this room, and not the polite aloofness that is sometimes associated with Southern hospitality, but with genuine warmth and curiosity and enthusiasm for our family to be here with everyone in this worship hall. We felt that this church was meant for us, that it was where we had always belonged, and joining this church has felt and still feels like, and we feel will continue to feel like, a homecoming, a reigniting of our faith together as a couple. When Allison and I met, we each felt that we had outgrown the spirituality of our upbringing. Allison for her reasons and me for mine. I was raised Methodist, proudly so. I was confirmed in the United Methodist Church of my hometown, and I reflect on that spiritual formation with incredible fondness. But I experienced this faith through the lens of a child and a young man, and I had never chosen to deepen that perspective. I had no memory of the rich nuance and theological tensions that inspire and engage me now. Stepping into a more active faith journey at Arapahoe has mirrored so much of what Allison has talked about with regards to our partnership and how our partnership has grown together. We think of ourselves as thoughtful and considered people, but it hasn't always been easy for us to learn and grow from one another. There's a delicate tension between shaping and being shaped by the important relationships in your life. And learning that tension between the two has been such an important part of our journey. Learning to love each other fully without expectation or condition, realizing that not every imperfection is a problem in need of fixing. Seeing that the stumbles and missteps of building a shared life, it is not a burdensome labor, but it is meaningful growth. And each of these has opened for us a deeper journey into our faith. We have new eyes for what we are experiencing. What we've practiced in our marriage has turned out to be exactly the posture required to welcome ourselves into this new spiritual season at this church.
Patrick and I have a lot of maxims or mantras in our home and our marriage. They're shorthand for attitudes we're trying to cultivate or lessons we're trying to internalize at the moment. Lately, we've been asking ourselves, can you love an imperfect thing? It's a challenge to us to accept flaws in ourselves, in our partner, in our kids, family, and community. It encourages us to overcome the desire to control for a perfect situation or an optimal outcome, and instead be open to the good. This practice of love and acceptance has been transformational in our marriage, and I also see now in hindsight that it was God's way of preparing us to continue our faith journey. No faith community is perfect, no theology is perfect, and we are certainly not perfect people. But we can practice love, which we now see as Christ's love, and be transformed by the connections it fosters. It's clear to us now that God has always been moving in our lives. There are no siloed domains when it comes to personal and spiritual growth. The lessons of our marriage turned out to be lessons for parenting, which turned out to be lessons for our faith journeys, which in turn changed our attitudes toward ourselves and the world. God is always preparing us for the next necessary step in our journey, usually indirectly. And we found that our job is mostly to stop trying to control, to let go of fear, and to trust in God and in the people and communities God has put in our lives. It is an extremely difficult lesson to learn, and we have to keep relearning it our entire lives, but it's always worth the effort.
I love that. Can we love an imperfect thing? Can we learn an imperfect thing? Well, I pray that you know that God does, that none of us are perfect, but we continue to grow, and we continue to learn, and we continue to seek. And hopefully by hearing other stories, I could even see some of you when Patrick and Allison were talking about the tensions and the challenges, and one's the gas and one's the brakes. I saw couples looking at each other like, we learn from each other. And so my prayer is that you continue to share your stories, that you ask others to share their stories, so that we can continue to grow as we go. Amen. Patrick?